you may have been discouraged by trying to get your music on terrestrial radio stations, mainstream, even Christian stations. Probably they very well have told you no.
Are saying the same thing. In fact, that terrestrial radio is still important,
Hmm.
but it doesn't have its monolithic status like it used
That's
to,
true. That's
and
true.
I don't think that's ever going to
Good.
change.
A good point you bring up, Nate, because somebody may be asking right now, well, gee, if I am I going to get paid to have my
Yeah.
music broadcast?
Finding out how you can get your music played on internet radio, because I really think this is going to help you to advance your impact and to reach more people.
Welcome to the Artist Impact Podcast, helping you gain confidence, grow your talent, and advance your impact. Here are your hosts, Paul Gibbs and Nate Miller.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Artist Impact Podcast. This is episode number 26, if my calculation is correct.
Cool.
I'm here with Paul Gibbs. Say
Hi,
hello, Paul.
guys. Yes.
And tonight we're talking about the importance of internet radio for the independent Christian musician and artist. And the funny thing is, normally Paul and I are sitting together live in the studio when we record this podcast, but this time we're doing this over the internet because
Yeah.
Paul right now is in upstate New York, while I am down in South Central PA. And it's only because we have this capability with technology that we have this opportunity to record this remotely, and that kind
Yeah.
of dovetails right with what we're talking about tonight, technology and being able to use that to reach people. So you want to talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that, Paul?
Oh, this is it's great, and let you folks know that as we typically do, we ask the Lord to be with us as we do this tonight, and that thanking Him for the technology because it is awesome. And if you guys, if you've delved into the technology part of this at all, and I don't think you can do music ministry these days without getting your feet wet in the whole technology pool. But it if you know how fantastic it is. And I just want to say that it's like 19 degrees here in upstate New York right now. But that's typical for this. And this is my home area, so I'm used to this. We'll probably be down around 5 degrees around tonight. But we're nice and warm here in our house near in the Glens Falls area. So anyway, we want to share with you guys tonight about what internet radio, what's going on with it. What's you've heard a lot about internet radio. Maybe you've not familiar with it at all. But either way, we want to give you a few facts and figures about what it's all about, where it's been, where we think it might be going, and how can it how can it help you as a Christian artist to do what God's called you to do, and that is reach the world for Him. So I'm going to start here with just a couple of facts and figures. And of course, radio's been around forever, just about. Radio was around before TV. I'm not sure. I think the first radio station, I believe, was like WGY in Schenectady, New York. I'm not sure. It was one of the first anyway, which is only like 40 or 50 miles south of where I'm sitting right now. Um, but there's been, radio's been around forever, and now internet radio is something that is really taking off as well. And radio, as long as it's been around, even though there's a lot of other platforms, radio is still the top way to reach consumers across all media platforms. Radio is still number one. Radio listeners account for 92%, or excuse me, 92% of people listen to radio on a regular basis as opposed to TV, 87%. And this is interesting too here, Nate. What do you think? What are people listening to on radio? Well, the number one format of people listening on radio is country music. Who,
Wow,
who'd have thought? But
I'm in the wrong genre.
yeah, well, we got some Southern gospel in here,
Yeah, that's
but
true.
anyway, but talk radio, commercial and non-commercial talk radio is number two, and then number three, people are listening to is adult contemporary style, and again, these are I'm talking secular and Christian among all both of those type. So
Mm.
yeah, so uh, and some people say, or some data might suggest, that terrestrial radio, over the air radio, is declining.
Mm-hmm.
Others not don't quite agree with that, but the data that I'm looking at. But if it is, and if that's the case, then internet radio is definitely offsetting that. It's growing at the same time that terrestrial radio may, in fact, be declining. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I found some interesting quotes. I'll give credit where credit is due. This was an article from CD Baby Online, and they were asking this very question: does radio still matter for musicians? And now they were specifically talking about terrestrial radio, which is where most of the major, the people who are signed to major labels, that's where their music's being played. And they asked seven different industry insiders what their opinion was, and it was interesting because all of them, some of them flat out said no, radio just isn't where it's at anymore. But
Mm,
every single one of them, even if they said that radio was important, almost gave a little bit of a caveat that, it's important, but
right.
internet radio is where, where it's at, or where
Yeah.
it's becoming to be. And I'm just going to read two quotes here that I found pretty interesting. Now, again, this was asking specifically, I think it was targeted more at what is terrestrial radio still valid or important. But their answers are pretty telling, because within their answers about commercial radio, they're mentioning internet radio right alongside with it. And so this first quote, it's pretty lengthy. I won't read all of it. I'll try to kind of cherry pick here. This first quote is from Ari Herstand, and he says, "Does radio still matter?" And he says, "Well, Pandora sure does. I'd argue Pandora is much more important than terrestrial radio. There's virtually zero chance of any non-label artist breaking through on terrestrial radio. And he says 98% of all major label artists don't make enough on their first release to recoup the advance,
Mm,
meaning that 98% of all major label artists fail. With that logic, only about 2% of all major label artists are getting serious radio play, but all of them are promised radio play from their label. So this
wow.
might be one of the reasons of where you're hearing the same artist and the same songs over and over again.
Ah,
He goes
yes.
on a little bit further here. Again, this is Ari Herstand. He says, "There's no denying that terrestrial radio can push a buzzing artist into a superstar one, but radio should not be a part of any indie or do-it-yourself artist's plan." Now, this is his opinion, but I think that's interesting that he says that.
Yeah.
He continues, "Radio is the final piece. Radio stations are no longer leaders in the industry, they are followers. Unless, as an indie, you can march into KROQ with somebody that I used to know YouTube numbers, there's no chance." And if you're not familiar with that song, Somebody That I Used to Know, it was a video on YouTube that had, you know, millions of views. So it was so popular that it just demanded respect.
Mm,
He goes on, "Put your efforts into satellite, Pandora, and the occasional local show on your hometown stations. Local NPR music stations are typically good about featuring local buzzing bands, and they are local tastemakers. They will definitely help with your local ground game and filling up your release show." And he ends with this: "YouTube matters, Pandora matters, SoundCloud matters, Spotify matters, Twitter matters, Facebook matters, playing live matters, touring matters, your email list matters. Radio, question mark? Not so much."
yeah.
So I thought that was pretty interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and the internet radio, I don't know, I don't have the stats on how many terrestrial stations there are, like in the US, or let's just say the world. But I
Hmm.
mean, it's phenomenal number, I'm sure. But this is interesting that internet radio stations, well,
Yeah.
how many are there? Well, there are a plethora of websites that you can go to that list internet stations. And one of them, just one of the many, is called streamfinder.com. And on that website, it lists over 17,000 internet radio stations.
That's incredible.
That
And for a part of our audience who maybe isn't familiar with internet radio or never gave it any thought, I mean, that has to be pretty pretty
yeah.
eye-opening, right?
Oh my goodness, it was for me when I
Yeah.
wow. And one more here before we move on. In 2019, in an average week, 60% of the population listened at some point to online radio.
Hmm.
And an average week, 60%, where and that was an increase of 3% over 2018 at 57%. So people are listening,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all those sources that you said, Pandora, Spotify, all
Mm-hmm.
of those, YouTube, et cetera. And so now that didn't I don't think that specifically listed online radio, but
Right.
it I'm sure that online radio, especially in the Christian realm, is growing. The use of it has got to be growing. Um, in fact, why don't we take a quick pause here and come back? And I've got a couple stats here, although the stats are now like a year old, but they're very interesting on
Mm-hmm.
the whole COVID thing,
Mm.
and where an online radio. So yeah, we'll take a quick break, Nate. We'll be right back. Okay, we're talking about in online radio, internet radio, and a lot of you folks, I'm sure, are very familiar with that. But Nate, I'm sure there are other people that may not even be aware that internet radio exists, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak from personal experience here. Now, maybe I'm showing my age a little bit here, but I actually still listen to CDs in the car because my car still has a CD player. But if I'm not listening to music on CD, I might be listening to a podcast, and if I am listening to music not on a CD, it's through, iTunes or Pandora or Amazon Music, some kind of application that I can run through my phone because my phone's hooked
Right.
up to my radio in my car. So definitely when I'm driving in the car, I'm listening to some sort of internet radio or digital streaming service through my
Yeah.
phone. And I would I would guess that most of our listeners, that most of the people that are part of our community here are the same way. Um, I I honestly don't listen to a lot of commercial radio, whether it's online or terrestrial. I don't know about you, Paul.
Well, I didn't. I didn't either. I wasn't
Yeah.
aware of it. I wasn't aware of it. But I mean, let's talk to the person, for example, that listens to radio.
Hmm.
Let's say has listened to radio, whether they're at work, maybe just at home. Of course, a lot of people now are working at home. But let's go back 10 years to the person who listened to the radio pretty much consistently. Um, they might not be aware that that radio station that they have loyally listened to over the years is now also online.
Right.
Yeah. Uh, there's a station here in Glens Falls, for example, that I recently found out that they've been online for years. So the cool thing about that is that the radio station, whether FM or maybe even AM,
Hmm.
that you listen to, you didn't think you could listen to if you were traveling 200 or 500 or 1,000 miles away.
Right.
Yeah, now you can because they are also online.
Yeah,
So
I think in some of my research, I saw that trend changed. I forget the exact date. I think it was like 2008, 2009, with the advent of iHeartRadio. That's
yeah,
really where commercial radio, like before that, they sort of just ignored internet radio. It was there, but they didn't really spend money in it because they had the command of the airwaves, radio waves, and they sort of just let it go. But then somewhere around that point, around 2008, 2009, they saw that this is growing to the point where they couldn't ignore it anymore, and they actually
right.
jumped in and used it. So just like you said, at least for the last 10 plus years,
Yeah,
commercial radio that you listen to over the terrestrial radio, they're online as well.
they're online as well.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Um, and you talked about listening in your car.
Yeah.
Here's another interesting.
That's the only time I ever listen to the radio. Mm.
And how and you are echoing there's so many exactly what they would say too. Now in 2011, we're throwing stats all over the place at you here, folks. In 2011, 5% of people listened to um, internet radio in their cars. And the way that they did that was over their phone
Mm-hmm.
during using apps or whatever. Now, in 2019, which is now pretty old data, that was up to 41%.
Oh, wow.
So that is really increased as people are becoming more aware of that. And uh, let me finish. I'll finish this thought. Okay, so I'll just
Mm-hmm.
train the thought. A couple other things here, and like as I said, people can listen, folks. If you've got a phone, and maybe if you've never thought of this before, maybe you've already done it, but if you haven't, there are apps that you can download for free on your phone. One is called Live 365, LIVE 365. Another one is called Simple Radio. Nice, easy to remember. Simple Radio. Another one is called Online Radio Box, and that's just three of many apps that you can download on your radio, or excuse me, on your phone or your tablet, and then use those apps to search for your favorite radio station, and just listen there. And if you connect your car with your phone to your car with your Bluetooth, and there you go. That's how I do it. Um, but now something else is coming on. It's going to make it even easier, and that is standalone internet radios. And I think this is so cool. And we'll try to put a graphic up of a couple of these uh, internet radios. You can find them on Amazon. Just do a search for internet radios on Amazon. The little portable ones that look like an old transistor radio with an antenna sticking up. That's so cool. Then you've got the tabletop models that you can just sit on your desk or on desk in your living room, whatever. Just like the old AM FM shortwave UHF radios that we used to have. It's so cool. And these prices are ranging from a low of maybe 50 or $60. The average seems to be 70, 80, $90, something like that for a decent internet radio. And they hook to your Wi-Fi, just like your computer does, and they let you tune in thousands and thousands, 17,000 radio stations from
Wow.
around the world. It's so cool.
That
So
is cool.
yeah, so this is becoming easier and easier, where I think it's only going to increase as people uh, want to go to internet, whether it's listening to your favorite station that you used to listen to just over the air, uh, or some station like ours, for example, like Notespire Radio, that is only online.
Yeah. So I'm going to read one more quote from that article I mentioned earlier, and then we'll go into a little bit more detail of why we really feel that internet radio is helpful to our audience, and especially to the independent Christian artists to advance their impact. So this is, again, one of the seven industry insiders that CD Baby interviewed about, is radio important anymore for the artist? And this is Janae Williams, who said, I think radio play still matters depending on your goals. So there's a clarification there.
Hmm.
If your goal is to get a Grammy or get mainstream recognition, I think that Macklemore and other contemporary artists prove that radio distribution still matters. Also, DJs play a very important role in building relationships in the industry and getting your music known and in the hands of industry executives. They still listen to the radio, and it plays an important role in their decisions. But I'm assuming Janae is a woman. She says if you're more interested in going the independent route, I think that internet streaming and subscription services, as well as live shows, will be the best way to get the word out about your music. And
Yep.
that's why we kind of want to pivot here a little more. Talking when we talk about radio, we're really talking about internet radio and streaming radio for the artists that we work with. Paul already mentioned just in passing, Notespire Music Radio. We run a 24/7 internet radio station where we play independent Christian musicians and artists. But I just have a few points here for you to think about. If you are an existing artist who hasn't yet gotten your feet wet, you haven't delved into the internet radio or streaming radio yet, to think about. One of the things is I think it provides a unique platform beyond your existing website and your social media posting that you're already doing. Those are all great things. Having a website, posting your music on Facebook, Instagram, definitely on YouTube. But you reach sort of a limit or a wall where like you only have so many outlets or platforms. How do you get beyond that? How do you reach people beyond that? And so this provides another unique platform for people to hear your music. Um, and by doing that, it expands your audience and your chances of being heard by listeners who would never have had the opportunity to hear or discover your music before. I mean, if you think about it, if you listen to shows or stations like Pandora or anything like that, you often will pick a station based on the music that you already like. And because of their algorithms, they will play other or provide other songs that are similar to your favorite music. And sometimes you'll discover new songs and new artists that you never heard of before that you love, you fall in love with. And you would never have found out about those if it wouldn't have been for these stations. So in the same way, your music can be discovered by an audience that's already existing. They just don't have a way to find you yet. So that's a great way to use internet radio to expand your audience. Um, Here's a unique thing to think about. Internet radio is usually listener supported rather than commercial, and therefore it's free to offer unique and original programming. In other words, it doesn't have to rely on set playlists or algorithms. Commercial radio is usually pretty set by the industry executives or whoever runs the radio programming, and those DJs have a set list of who gets played and how often, and they have to stick to it. It's all automated a lot of times, and they don't really have a lot of freedom to choose what artists to play and what songs you're going to get to hear. And that's why you can switch from one radio station to the next and sometimes hear the exact same song almost in the exact same spot. And it can be frustrating sometimes because you know there's more music out there. There's other artists out there, but you're just not hearing them. So that's one cool thing about internet radio, especially if it's an independent radio station, because they're free to choose their playlist and to highlight people that you might never hear before. Another thing to think about for internet radio is that they're, those stations are usually free to promote your music. They can announce upcoming shows and performances for you, and they can even provide interviews and or live and on-air performances. So that's a cool thing. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to walk into any major radio station and demand or even request, first of all, an interview, let alone a live performance. But you're more likely to get that from an internet radio station, especially an independently owned and run one.
Right.
Um, one more thing is internet radio will connect your music directly to the audiences and listeners who are likely to purchase your music, to share it with others, and to become part of your fan base. So these are all things that I thought about as I was doing research on this, and
Yeah.
these are the reasons why I would really suggest if you haven't delved into this yet, start thinking about it. Start listening to these stations and hearing music and finding out how you can get your music played on internet radio, because I really think this is going to help you to advance your impact and to reach more people for the Lord and for your music ministry and the message that you want to get out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, very good thoughts, Nate.
Yeah.
Um, we I was just going to say, I mentioned the whole COVID thing,
Hmm.
and there was I'm looking at a website that uh, talked about the second quarter, I guess, of 2020, when even as early as into March of last year of 2020, uh, saw internet usage just kind of shoot up in those first couple 3 months of the pandemic,
Oh,
and
I bet.
that included a streaming, listening to music online, and internet radio use. Although I don't have a stat on that exactly, but I think if we delved a little further into that, we would see internet radio listener use listeners go up drastically in the
Hmm.
past year. And this also talks about, this article talked about drive time when people
Mm,
are, again, going back to people being in their cars, uh, and they've got quite a choice of things that they can listen to, um, but making and this is something that we are trying to do here at Notes by Our Music, is make people more aware of internet radio, our station in particular, of course, but in just internet radio in general, and making those drivers, those people in their cars, drive time. I know that with the pandemic, that's drive time is not quite what it used to be, but
right.
now,
Everybody's working from
now it's
home.
work at home time, which is even even more of that, but making people aware. So all
Mhm.
that, going right back to what Nate just said, friends, to do what you can and look for ways to get your music on internet radio, and of course on the streaming services too, iTunes, Pandora, Spotify, all of those ways as well. So,
Yeah.
and again, that's all going to help you get that message out there to the world. Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's pretty telling that I don't remember exactly when it started, but within the last few years, YouTube introduced a new app, YouTube Music, which you can download separately. And because they know that people are on there just to
right.
play music. People are
Yeah,
watching music videos, or just there are a lot of people who put together playlists of songs. Like you can listen to, like, 80s flashback, best of 80s songs, and they'll put a whole list of just specifically like 80s hits. They're obviously videos because they're on YouTube, but people will just hit play and listen to that. So
right,
YouTube got pretty smart to that, so they created YouTube Music as a separate app because they know people are or watching it or consuming YouTube for music. So now you can create a subscription service, and like you tell them what type of music or artist that you like, just like Pandora, and it puts together the music for you. So
mm-hmm,
um, the even industry standards like YouTube notice this, and they're responding accordingly. So internet radio, I don't think I read some articles that were saying that things have changed definitely, especially with there was some legislation back in 2016 that actually caused Live 365, which we mentioned earlier, to shut
right.
down at one
To shut
point,
down, right,
and then it was restarted by another entrepreneur. But some of the legislation that had to do with royalties and the artists and the labels and the writers and some other people that are involved in the music to get, you know, compensation for what was being played on internet radio, because when it first started, it was like a wild west. Like anybody who had an internet connection and
oh yeah,
a selection of music could play it, and there was like no one was regulating it. So
right,
um, we won't get into a lot of details, but like, we use Live 365 to host Note Spire Radio, and we pay dues to them, not only for them to host our show, or I mean our radio station, but that is the way that we pay royalties
yeah,
to the people who deserve them, because they have to pay um,
right.
for anybody that is deserving of royalties and anybody who's doing copyrighted music.
Right.
Um,
That's a good
yeah,
point you bring up, Nate, because somebody may be asking right now, well, gee, if I am I going to get paid to have my
yeah,
music broadcast? Well, uh, again, Live 365 is how we do it. That's what the
hmm,
company that we use. They ensure that artists do get paid. There are others as well. The other companies, other radio stations may go through other companies that make sure. But I tell you, friends, if you talk to an online station, that's a good question to ask. Are you
hmm,
paying license fees? Is this legitimate?
yeah.
Make sure that it is. Yeah,
And
good.
yeah, that's the reason I said before that most, internet radio stations are listener supported. It's not free. I mean, even for us, we have to we spend, I won't
Right.
say it, but it's,
Yeah.
you know,
Every
hundreds of
month there's a
dollars
bill.
every month and hundreds of dollars a year so that we can host our radio station. And by paying it forward to Live 365, we're paying for those royalty fees. So it's not totally free to run a radio station.
Yeah.
But and my whole point in bringing that up was, some of the research I was doing, they were saying that because of those restrictions that started in 2016, they've seen a shift in internet radio because some of the people that were doing it before, because there really wasn't any legislation or regulations, when that came up, they just like cut their losses and bowed out because they didn't want to pay the fees to do it.
Right.
So there was a hit to it, but I think it's pretty clear that the people who are doing it legally and doing it correctly, and like we just said with like people like YouTube creating YouTube Music and other apps and stuff like that, the internet radio is not going away. And these quotes that I read from this article are saying the same thing. In fact, that terrestrial radio is still important,
Hmm.
but it doesn't have its monolithic status like it used
That's
to, and
true. That's
and
true.
I don't think that's ever going to change.
Yeah, I think the terrestrial stations that want to keep existing are
Yeah.
adding an online presence. But there's even more online only stations, I believe, coming that will be in the future.
Yeah.
So where does this? Let's see. We'll try to draw this to a close
Yeah.
here. So where does this? What is this? What's our takeaway here? I think for one thing, we're saying to the Christian artists that might be listening that first of all, as we said before, online radio is I think should be a part of what you're doing,
Hmm.
how you're getting your music out there. It shouldn't be the only thing, but if you haven't considered it, then it really should be something that you consider. Um, you may have been discouraged by trying to get your music on terrestrial radio stations, mainstream, even Christian stations. Probably they very well have told you no.
Hmm.
But the smaller, I shouldn't say smaller because they're not smaller. Um, I mean, online stations can reach the whole world, but
Yeah.
the internet stations very likely are more likely to say yes, we will play your music. That's not a guarantee, but they'll certainly consider it as we do. But
Hmm.
that's one thing, Nate. And what are others that what should people be taking away from this?
Again, if you haven't considered it, just think about the fact that on your own you can only do so much. Like I said, if you're using your website, social media, you're using YouTube or any other platform, those are all great things. But if you hit a ceiling, hit a wall, and you're like, what more can I do?
Right.
Um, Consider internet radio. I mean, all those stats that Paul shared, that's pretty amazing. Like, what'd you say, 17,000 internet radio stations
On
out
this
there?
on that one, over 17,000.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this is just a great way to increase your listenership, your fan base, um, and to network. You're going to reach people that you never reached before. And here's another cool thing. This was one that I had in my notes that I just throw out there.
Mm.
One thing you can do with especially an independent internet radio provider like us is you can record station identification snippets that
Yeah.
each hour we have to identify our radio station. This is you're listening to Notespire Radio. So we can record you saying that, this is so and so. you know
Yep.
you talk about, you give your name as an artist, and you're listening to, or you hear me on Notespire Radio, for
Yep.
example. So you bring your attention to yourself as an artist and your music, and you also let people know that they're going to hear your music on that station. That's
Yes.
such a cool thing that you can do, that you would never have a chance to do that on a major terrestrial radio channel.
I've heard that on mainstream radios. Hi, this is a really famous artist.
Yeah,
And you hear my music or whatever on, a very popular big name radio station, and I always thought that was pretty cool.
that is really cool.
Yeah. So I thought, that, and I've heard other Christian stations do it as well. So, but like you said, Nate, we do that on Outspire Radio. So
Yeah,
you're gonna hear many of our artists say, "Hi, this is so and so, and thanks for listening to WNSM DB Notespire Radio." So that again, that makes it personal.
yeah,
It gives a relationship. uh,
yeah, and
we like to have a relationship with the artists that we play, and we want the artists that we play to have a relationship with our listeners. So that's very important.
yeah. Real quick as we wrap up here, when you said that about relationship, that just came to mind. Um, because we are an independent Christian radio station, we have relationships with other radio stations just like us in other areas, and I think it's so cool that we're almost like a family or a
Yeah.
close community. In fact, we play other people's programs on our radio station and vice versa. You know, we have the Just Got Music Hour, which is a weekly podcast that you do, Paul, and you're playing independent Christian artists, and that podcast is also has been picked up and is being played by I
Hmm.
think like eight other
7 or 8 other
seven or eight
stations.
other radio stations that are not
Yeah.
us.
Right.
So if you're played on that podcast, not only are you played on Notes Radio, you're played on a dozen other radio stations
Yeah.
and vice versa. So it's such a great way
It
to
is.
expand your reach and your territory.
Yeah. Yeah. So, friends, we want to encourage you, if you'd like to know more about this, if you'd like to delve into, if you haven't, into seeing about having your music played on internet radio, we would like to be the place that you start. Get a hold of us. Our email is info at notespire radio. Excuse me, I'm sorry. That's our website. Let me back up. The email is info at notespiremusic.com. That's our main website. Info at notespiremusic.com. Get in touch with us. Say, hey, we heard the podcast. Would like to submit some music. Would you take a listen? And we'll be happy to take a listen to the music that you've got. The station that we have is Notespire Radio, and that website is notespireradio.com. Um, but I also wanted to encourage you, if you're familiar with other stations, there are websites. In addition to emailing us, well, I want to encourage you to go to, and I don't have it, we'll put it up on the screen. There are many websites that you can use to submit your music to online stations. So we'll see if we can help you with that as well. And yeah, I want to encourage you to take a listen to our station. Again, Radio. I'll get those two mixed up. Notespireradio.com. Nate will put it on the screen
I
because
will.
I'm messing this all up. And let's see, what else do we want to tell folks about, Nate?
All right, again, email us directly info at notespiremusic.com. Our website is notespiremusic.com. The website for the radio, notespireradio.com. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, and we're on YouTube at Notespire Music TV.
Yeah, there we go. We're all over the place.
Yeah,
Check us out. These podcasts, including this one, of course, you're listening to. You may be hearing it on our station, or you may be hearing it on one of your favorite podcast sites. These podcasts that we do are all over. Whatever podcast site you listen to, you're going to find the Notespire Radio Artist Insight, which is what we're doing right now. You're
Artist
also going to find.
Impact.
I'm sorry. This is the Artist Impact. Thank you.
We
It
have too
says
many
it's.
podcasts.
Whoa, I'm getting confused.
That's all right.
Aren't you glad aren't you guys glad it's going to be all on the screen? But if you're just listening to this, and you guys, I'm sorry, you're on your own.
This is, by the way, for our listeners, this is the Artist Impact Podcast,
Thank
and
you.
this is where we do artist development and help you find ways to gain confidence, grow your talent, and advance your impact.
That's good. He says it
Yeah.
so well. Yeah. But let me see if I can get this straight. We also have the Artist Insight podcast, which is interviews with artists just like you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So check that out, the Artist Insight podcast.
Which
And
gets played on our internet radio station.
it certainly does. And that is out there on all the podcast sites as well. And finally, as Nate mentioned earlier, the Just Got Music Hour is a 1 hour podcast that I do each week, and that highlights the music of independent artists as well. You can find all of this information, as confusing as we've made it. You can just go to notespiremusic.com and it's all there. Okay. All right.
Amen.
Well, friends, thank you so much for taking the time to share to be there so we could share with you guys, and we hope that you have been blessed by this. Hope you got a little bit out of it. That's our goal. So, Nate, anything else we got as we wrap up?
I think we gave him enough to chew on.
I think we did. Okay. All right, friends. Until we see and talk to you again, please do take care of yourselves.
And take care of each other.
We'll see you next time. God bless.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.